This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den. And welcome into episode number 108 here on the Huskies Warming House Podcast. Noah Grant alongside Nick Maxon, as always, here on this Sunday, April 17th of 2022. And at least that's when you'll be hearing this. That's when it's coming out. But we are recording right in the middle of the Minnesota Wild game here on Saturday, just after 4 o'clock. And it hasn't been much of a game for the Wild against a team that they're probably going to be matching up against in the first round. So we'll dissect a little bit related to that in our extra ice session. As far as the regular portion of the show, a lot of interesting news and notes in the Center Ice View news and notes section, including some college hockey related to St. Cloud State. Kind of a look around the league. There hasn't been a whole lot going on in NCAA hockey, but a couple notable things to talk about, but really influencing the trend westward and the trend south in college hockey. Good things for the college hockey world, maybe not so much for the NHL world, maybe down over yonder in Arizona. And of course, great tidbits and things you won't want to miss for some milestone things and such in the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup. And that's what we'll start right now. Center Ice View news and notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
Illustrated Weekly Roundup, Noah. And well, when it comes to the National Hockey League, when it rains, it pours. And what we're talking about is an independent investigation into the NHLPA. And again, this goes back to the Chicago Blackhawks and the Kyle Beach situation. No, that has not been finished yet. So the latest findings were released just yesterday, and the law firm conducting this independent review was Cozen O'Connor, and effectively the nothing burger that came out of this, Noah, and I think that's really what, as kind of really the conversation is with a lot of people right now, is just really nothing was really found to be at fault. It was sort of a kind of like a pointing the finger into the left, and that's everybody around the circle. But effectively, one of the quotes in the statement read this: so, we cannot identify any individual wrongdoing or institutional failures of policy or procedure by either Fair, they're talking about NHL Executive Director Donald Fair, NHLPA personnel, or the SABH program concerning the handling of Beach's reports. Beach's warnings about Aldrich were not addressed on account of miscommunication and misunderstanding rather than any individual or systemic failure. So yeah, again, a nothing burger. Effectively, if you read through that, obviously, this has been quite the storyline around the NHL the last probably 18 months. After all this kind of came forward, again, in 2013 was when a lot of this started to make headways about Aldrich. Chicago then immediately placed Kyle Beach on loan to Sweden. So again, it was the player or the victim in this case, and not the, as the perpetrator that got really the brunt of the consequences. And no, I kind of want to get your take on this. Again, another failure, this time by the organized body that's supposed to represent the players. I'm just curious as to your take on this statement.
Well, the word that always comes to mind, I think, for this is shameful. But beyond that, The thing that's most difficult about this, and by and large, when you talk about Donald Fair and the work that he's done for the NHLPA, by and large, I think he has done a good job. But unfortunately, his position or someone near to him is kind of someone who's supposed to be on the chopping block for something like this. If anything, as a representative, a proxy, whatever you want to call it, for an incident like this, to show that the game is maybe going to be getting better and developing in the right direction, saying, hey, we messed up here, and we're going to hold X, Y, and Z accountable. That didn't happen here, unfortunately. Now,
No.
How much did the NHLPA really factor into this? I'm not here to say one way or the other. I'm not that well versed in it. So, but on the surface, a real lack of accountability. I think it's when we went through Chicago's investigation for the Jenner and Block and opened up the Blackhawks organization, it was like pulling teeth. And it's disappointing to know that now another entity, another step, the NHLPA, and by extension, the NHL, it's like going to the dentist chair all over again with this stuff. That's the part that is just awful. Is we talk about growing the game, we talk about being better, we talk about all these initiatives that we're going to do this and that, and then you get a report like this that basically says, yeah, but it's not going to be us. It's going to be the next group. They'll do it. We didn't do anything wrong. The next group will do it. Honestly, best comparison kind of sounds like politicians, to be honest with you, in a lot of sense. It's somebody else's problem, but it's not mine, and just awful, I think.
Really, and I think obviously a lot of eyes will be on the NHLPA, the NHL, as the bigger bodies. As we know, Chicago, at least the organization, made some sweeping changes after that Block and Jenner report. Although, let's just say CEO Rocky Wirtz has also rocked a few boats there afterwards, again, with a really lack of transparency in terms of now, how do you prevent this from happening again? And I don't think anybody, whether it's the Blackhawks organization, the NHLPA, or the NHL, has really addressed any of how they would prevent this sort of thing from happening again. And I think that's the most shameful part about this whole thing, Noah, is, what happened was awful to Kyle Beach. And, well, you kind of, you hope that, this sort of thing doesn't happen again. But until you really give us the hockey fan or even just the people, right, just something, there's still a lot left to be dissected from this, and certainly will not be the last time we hear about the Kyle Beach situation, unfortunately. Still a lot of things, a lot of work to do around the NHL.
Rocky Wirtz's boat is one boat that if it flips over, nobody help him get back into it, please.
Right.
Please.
Just ask Mark Lazarus at The Athletic. I think he'll be the first one there. Another yawn. The NHL Winter Classic was announced for 2023, this time taking place at Fenway Park, January 2nd of this time, which is interesting. Usually it's a January 1st game. They've actually pushed it back one day. Yeah. So this is interesting. But 6 outdoor game. It's Penguins and Bruins. Let's just say that before I go into the next tidbit. 6th game outdoors for Pittsburgh, 5th for Boston, 2nd Winter Classic at Fenway Park, and I believe the only venue so far to hold multiple Winter Classics. Bruins beat Philadelphia 2-1 back in overtime back in 2010. I believe that was the first ever Winter Classic.
No,
not. Okay.
Buffalo.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Buffalo, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was part of the first ever Classic, though. But it's weird, though, because January 1st of 2023 is a Sunday. So why would you not want a game on a Sunday? You know what I mean?
Reasons, I guess. I don't know. Numbers, right? But speaking of numbers, Noah, some interesting numbers here. Minnesota Wild transitioning a little bit to the hometown squad. A obscene gesture has turned to be quite the charity fundraiser. Almost $40,000 last time we checked. Here is around $37,000 that was raised. Now, it kind of ended up being at first that there was a lot of fans that somehow found his Venmo account and basically offered to pay the fine that he received from the NHL for the obscene gesture. For those who haven't seen the video, it's quite hilarious. And with that, Ryan Hartman has raised almost $40,000 now. He's actually chip in some of his own money to donate to Children's Hospital Twin Cities. So one small negative turned into a very big positive. So pretty cool.
Yeah,
I think.
Speaking of big positives, I know that for those, like we talked about, as we're tracking the Minnesota Wild game, first of all, it's funny to see Evander Kane's ex-wife donate $200 into that. But Nick, hot off the press here at 4:25 in the afternoon, Kirill Kaprizov has just broken the franchise record for most goals in a single season, actually just scoring in the third period of the Blues game. So kind of a cool little milestone as well, too. A lot of good things going on for the Minnesota Wild, like we talked about. We'll touch on them in the extra ice session. But yeah, hopefully they can find their way back against St. Louis. Of course, those of you listening know the result already, but we'll see.
We don't. So there you go.
Yeah.
College hockey news. How about this? Jerry York, a longtime head coach at Boston, at Boston's college, I should say, retiring now. 50 seasons behind the helm. He's 76 years old, so he's had quite the run. Unbelievable, right? So 28. So his entire coaching career, let's put it this way: 28 seasons at BC, 15 with Bowling Green, 7 at Clarkson, 1,123 victories, 41 of which came in the NCAAs, 4 national championships at Boston, 1 at Bowling Green, so 5 national titles to his name. He's only one of 3 coaches in NCAA history to win national titles at 2 different schools. The Bowling Green one was 1984, so that one goes back even before I exist, which not a lot can happen with that. Hall of Fame inductee in 2019 as a builder, and the late Michigan head coach of Vic, is it Heiliger? Heiliger, yeah, holds the record for the most NCAA championships as well with 6. So he's one shy of that, but quite the career and quite the name there. That's exiting college hockey, not just Boston College and out east. He was a very fundamental name out there as far as college hockey is concerned.
Yeah, he was. Just an incredible career, and it really touched the lives of a lot of people around him. And, a lot of NHLers, especially, kind of in recent area. I mean, you throw Matt Boldy in there, obviously, but, Johnny Gaudreau, Kevin Hayes, guys like that, and kind of the 2010s to 2015s, that era especially really has been the new wave babies for the NHL that aren't so much babies anymore, actually, come to think of it. So a very impressive career that he has had. And, I think it's one thing too, him and I think Red Berenson is probably the other name that you would throw in there as kind of the guys that have really stood the test of time in college hockey. It feels weird to kind of finally see that, that turnover now. We're starting to see the new generation, so to speak, really turn over, not only in college hockey, but the NHL as well too, right? Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, they're starting to hit their ages as well too. So eras are starting to decline, and new superstars a la Kirill Kaprizov are starting to take over in the college hockey and NHL world. So wishing Jerry the best of luck in retirement. 76 years old, a long time to coach hockey.
I think he's earned plenty of beaches and margaritas in his time off. Finally, some junior hockey news out of the
youth stuff.
Yeah, right, youth stuff in the CHL. So the Canadian Hockey Leagues. Michael, is it Miza?
I think so.
Or Misa. Either way,
he's good at hockey, I hear.
Yeah, very good. In fact, he's so good, he's going to be the 6th OHL player in history to be granted exceptional player status at age 15. So what does that mean for those who don't know that? That means, I think, was it 16 is your draft eligible year? And basically they're saying you're so good, we'll let you go in at 15, right? So they have a draft. It works similar to the NHL draft, and there you go. So eligible now for the 2022 OHL draft. Others who've names, you may have heard some of these that were granted this exceptional status. How about this? John Tavares, Aaron Ekblad, Connor McDavid, Sean Day, and Shane Wright. And Shane Wright is NHL draft eligible this year. And he's going to be probably the presumed #1 overall pick. So how about that, right? How about this? Connor Bedard, also the only player in the WHL to receive this distinction. Joe Veleno, the only QMJHL. Now, again, for those who don't know, the WHL, the QMJHL, and the OHL are all part of the CHL umbrella. So all part of that same sort of CHL league. So that's pretty crazy. Draft for the OHL for this is April 29th. So just a couple weeks away.
Yeah, just a couple of weeks away. Normally, we don't track things live on the show, Nick. The Wild just scored again. It is now 4-3. So maybe we should keep doing the show because it seems like it's working. Speaking of things that are working, in our final topics here for the weekly roundup, transaction news: Tampa Bay signing backup netminder Brian Elliott to a 1-year deal for next season. Random hockey question for you, Nick. Where did Brian Elliott play his college hockey? Do you remember?
I want to say I do. Was it BC?
Wisconsin. He was a Badger, actually.
He was a Badger.
Yeah, I believe.
Maybe that's why I don't recognize the name, because I don't pay attention to the red.
I believe he was part of that national championship team in 2006, if I'm not mistaken. I probably am. But I do remember Brian Elliott. The only reason I know that is because when I was a kid, he was the first Wisconsin netminder that I remember. So thought I'd posit that one out there to you.
Also breaking news, Noah, on that Ryan Hartman goal, Mats Zuccarello gets his 51st assist. So he breaks a Minnesota Wild franchise record with most assists in a season, previously held by Pierre-Marc Bouchard with 50. So 2 records broke on the same day.
Also, fun fact for you, Matt Zuccarello also tallied his 500th career point today as well too. So
what's going on here? I don't like this.
Yeah.
Is it? Something's going to happen to me. I'm telling you that later.
There's a full moon tonight, isn't there? Anyway,
something.
Things that aren't going to be moving in any direction for some people, although Ben Myers did leave the University of Minnesota to sign with Colorado. Los Angeles' Brock Faber and Toronto's Matty Nyes are going to return to Minnesota and the Golden Gophers next season. So something to keep an eye on. I think this Gopher squad is getting ready to reload very quickly with a very good incoming freshman class.
Yes, they do.
Championed by I forget his name. I just had him up here. Who is the
Logan Cooley?
Yeah, Logan Cooley, who decommitted from Notre Dame and is now going to Minnesota and is a top 5 to top 10 potential pick in this year's draft. He's an absolute stud. So probably the best centerman in the draft this year, to be honest with you. So other players in college hockey, Johnny Beecher and Thomas Bordelot of Michigan, the Wolverines, both signing with Boston and San Jose in the NHL respectively. So a couple other college guys getting their paydays. Sadder news. We did have a passing in the hockey world. If you missed this one, 4-time Stanley Cup champion, essentially one of the most prolific pure goal scorers in NHL history, actually holds the record for the best goals per game clip in NHL history at 0.76 goals per game. Mike Bossy, he passed away at the age of 65 from lung cancer. He had to step away from his role as a TV analyst earlier this season. His playing career was not that long lived. Actually had a bunch of 50-goal seasons, was on pace for another one until a back injury kind of side railed his career at like 30 or 31. So 10 years in the show, 573 goals and 1,126. Yeah, it's just incredible. That's nuts. So 1991 Hall of Fame inductee, winning the Calder, Conn Smythe, and Lady Byng trophies, and his number 22 was retired by the Islanders in 1992. Nick Maxon struggling here in the camera game, apparently. Had to switch cameras halfway through. We have some gremlins here today, none of which apparently St. Louis just scored again. It's now 5-3, and on top of that, Ryan Hartman is now credited with that goal that we thought went to Kaprizov. So a lot of things not making sense, but what we do know, Mike Bossy, one of the best players of his era and in all of National Hockey League history, passing away at 65. Nick, do you remember kind of tributes to Mike Bossy, when you were a kid, maybe? He had the Hall of Fame induction in 1991, but obviously his legacy has continued throughout New York Islanders history for a long time.
Not really specifically him as far as tributes are concerned, but I do know that, when you talk about Islanders hockey in terms of some of the all-time greats, his name was always in that conversation. Going back to the Islanders dynasty, was it the early 80s, right? Where they had like the fourth straight Stanley Cups?
Fourth straight.
Yeah. Yeah, holy cow. So Mike Bossy, again, just more about his demeanor off the ice, too, and just how he carried himself as well. So just a phenomenal human being, obviously fantastic hockey player, and it's definitely a piece of Islanders' hearts will be missed here with this loss, unfortunately.
Yeah, of course, scored the overtime winner to beat Toronto back in the day. One of the biggest goals in history for that franchise as well too. So obviously wishing his family nothing but the best, like you mentioned, as we continue to move forward. Moving forward, our final topic, injury news. Some good news, some bad news. The good news, Vegas's Mark Stone returned after missing 26 games. So good for him to see him back on the ice, although the cap situation becomes question marks for Vegas moving forward. And Montreal seeing Carey Price back in the net for the first time since last season. So good to see him getting a standing ovation there. However, Montreal losing a couple of bodies, none of which, of course, Jake Allen, losing him for the season in net, as well as defenseman Justin Barron. So Montreal just a tough season for the Canadians. A lot of netminders actually kind of in this little segment here. Penguins netminder Tristan Jarry week to week right before the playoffs. So Casey DeSmith is going to be relied on pretty heavily as they approach their playoff run. Dallas goaltender Braden Holtby could potentially miss the rest of the year as well. And Robin Lehner is away personally for a health issue involving his family member. So wishing him and his family the best of luck. In player injuries for outskaters, we just have two from Vancouver, both of them. Bo Harvet is going to miss at least 2 weeks with a leg injury after blocking a shot. And Niels Hoglander out indefinitely after a core muscle groin tear. Welcome into episode number 108. It has been a rip-roaring start for us. It is, I don't know what is going on here, but for those of you who just missed the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup, things don't make any sense, honestly.
No.
So what does make sense? You are here, episode number 108. We're recording this on Saturday at the tail end of the Minnesota Wild game. Sunday, this show comes out, and then next Sunday, we will not actually have a show. We will not have a show through the rest of the month of April. Nick and I are going to take a week off for some personal things and some travel things for Nick continuing his job search, myself finishing, getting ready for finals, moving into the school year as well. So what does that mean? We're going to be back on basically around May 1st, a day before the start of the NHL playoffs. So we're going to give you kind of a primer in the extra ice session to talk Minnesota Wild. And we're going to kind of try to wrap up some college hockey things and kind of give you some things to look forward to for the summer as well, too. So Nick, as we're powering through the show here, let's start with college hockey. Let's start with our St. Cloud State Huskies, shall we? Trivia question for today. Our second to last trivia of season 3 was today. And of course, Tanner Heath was our winner. He's going to take home season 3 of trivia, regardless of the result next week. He got this question right. Question did read, recent graduates for St. Cloud State men's hockey are having a great start to their pro careers. 2 years ago, a graduating class of 5 finished college hockey. How many of those 5 players from the Huskies played pro hockey, and who were they? So, Nick, the year that you and I were actually in person at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center, 5 graduates on that roster. How many of them played professional hockey?
So Jake Wallen was one of them. He went to play in the EC. Wasn't all 5? Didn't all 5 make it?
You are correct. All 5 did make it, playing in a range, essentially, from the NHL, AHL, ECHL, or the SPHL, the Southern Professional Hockey League. Jack Paling, his brother Nick, Jake Wallen, like you mentioned, Jack Ashawn, and Clark Custer was the 5th one as well, too. So wishing all those guys the best of luck wherever life is taking them at the current moment. But our current St. Cloud State Huskies preparing for the 2022-23 season, adding a couple of bodies here, Nick. When you think about the additions for St. Cloud, we talked about how Grant Cruikshank, first of all, would be a really great addition to this team. If anything, a good scorer down the middle, somebody who could play a top 6 role. Had a good relationship with Brett Larson, almost came to St. Cloud last year, 15 points last season, a good face-off guy, although he did play mostly wing, and a +8 rating. What a great pickup for St. Cloud.
Big pickup. Not the biggest kid in the world, but he's got some offensive upside. I think there was, to put it to you this way, there's some other talent that was around Minnesota that probably dropped him further down the lineup. He'll definitely be a top 6 forward here for St. Cloud State as they go through a bit of a retool, or a reload, I should say. And there could be some really nice young pieces forward that he could be playing with that could be quite electric if he's able to fit in well with the lineup. So great pickup. The leadership, obviously, is their former, I shouldn't say, was he a former captain with CC?
Ooh, that's a great question. I can elite prospects them very quickly.
I know Brian Yuna has been their captain the last 2 seasons. So maybe I'm thinking of,
well, we're
somebody else.
We're about to find out in about 5 hot seconds. But
but
what
much
a
needed depth.
Scorer. Yeah,
prolific and a much needed depth down the middle, as the Huskies are really missing some center depth in their lineup right now.
Nick, you were actually right on it. He was actually a captain for 2 seasons for Colorado College.
I thought he was. Okay.
Yeah, so you were right there. The other body that St. Cloud did add on the back end, and this is actually a slightly younger body, only going to be a junior this season, Dylan Anhorn, coming over from Union. 7 goals, 13 assists, 20 points now adding to the roster with 9 defensemen that are expected to be on the roster at minimum for St. Cloud State. Union finishing 7th out of 11 teams in the ECAC last year, but he finished, like I said, with 20 points on a team that went 14, 19, and 4. So maybe some underlying numbers that might kind of be a diamond in the rough type player that might add some depth for this group. Nick, this is obviously not as well known of a name as Grant Cruikshank. So can you kind of walk us through what the thinking from Brett Larson, the coaching staff, is for adding a defenseman of this caliber?
So let me give you 2 names that all Huskies fans should know as of late. How about Jimmy Schultz and Jack Ashawn?
Who?
I know, right? And then even more recently, Nick Perbix. You need some more offense from the blue line, effectively. I think there's kind of been a hole in terms of a shooting threat from the defensive end. As much as Nick Perbix was really good offensively, he was more of a feet-first offensive player. He really wasn't a shooting threat. He was a good playmaker, good creator of space, but that's not a shooting threat. And I think they're really missing this. Transfer coming in from Union. As I lose my voice, we're losing everything today. No, I can't believe it.
Yeah, ironically enough, as soon as you mentioned that, Marcus Foligno just scored. So
5-4 now. Okay,
yeah.
Interesting. The world is coming to an end at some point today. Yeah, nuts. Someone is pulling the strings somewhere, and it's just nuts. But that's if you can add a little bit more pizzazz, and I think what really is throwing these two is, could you imagine what if there was any one particular special teams unit that kind of really fell off toward the end of last season? Maybe the power play unit. Spencer Meyer has a cannon of a shot. We know that, although I don't think they really used it as much. They've tried using 4 forwards, and then obviously when you have no longer the likes of Sam Henches too, I think you need a little bit more firepower on your back end. And so this is kind of where I think the thinking comes into play. Good mobile defenseman from some of the film I've seen of him. So a little bit of offense, definitely some footwork, because again, the Huskies continuing to try to match a lot of the young influx that's going to happen, especially with North Dakota coming up. You're going to have to match speed for speed. So I think that's exactly why Brett Larson goes out and picks up this player. And I think it's a good one, at least on paper. We'll obviously have to see how he does when he actually puts on a sweater for the first time.
Actually kind of interesting, maybe he's a second power play unit defenseman along with Spencer Meyer, and maybe you give Jack Peart and Josh Lidke some growing pains, so to speak, and see if they can run with that first power play unit, or maybe, one of those guys is paired with a forward up top, maybe like Yami Kranila, a guy who's good along the half wall that has some good speed and good recovery potentially as well too. Grant Cruikshank, who knows? A lot of things obviously to look forward to. This defensive core really has the potential, should the young guys make the jump, to really be a good strength for the St. Cloud team. And we might see a different group. I know the Huskies have really kind of been predominantly a team that essentially goes back, oh, hey, would you look at that, Nick? The Wild just scored again. It is 5-5. It is 5-5, and it is Kirill Kaprizov. As far as we know from who else but Matt Zuccarello, potentially for a franchise record-breaking 43rd goal. I have no idea. But
this is nuts.
But speaking of goals, we're just going to keep plugging on the show because apparently it's working. St. Cloud has really been known as that type of team that is not really running gun, but really kind of speed and skill-based and relying on that a little bit more than their grit, really kind of working from the front end forward instead of relying on their back end so much. This team might have a different identity where they might rely a little bit more on their defensive core, maybe a couple performances from Dominic Bassi or the other goaltending tandems, whatever they may be, and really focusing on taking care of their half of the ice and then trying to get the forwards integrated and up to speed and finding some chemistry. Because I think the forward groups, there's a lot of things that are really kind of confusing for this group on the forward side as to who's really going to be that standout player, who's going to step up and take the mantle, who's going to be the guy that takes the next step. I think we have a couple guys in mind, Yami Kranila, Zach Okabe, are two guys that come to mind. Does Grant Cruikshank rekindle a little bit of NCHC success when he comes in a St. Cloud sweater? But as I look at this roster, I think more of the potential depth and the biggest growth is going to come from this back end. Your face says maybe otherwise. Do you agree or disagree?
No, I actually don't disagree at all. And here's why. You have a very young forward core that's going to be coming in. So you almost are going to have to rely on some dependable defensemen that can transition the puck forward, that can make smart decisions. And sometimes it's using your feet, right? That was one thing that Nick Pervix was so good at, was sometimes he'd look up and he'd be skating a little bit. You wouldn't see an option. He would just continue to carry the puck. So he was able to exit the zone in multiple different ways, had good first passes. And I think just to take some pressure off of some young forwards, are going to have to, learn in the NCHC trial by fire. Your defensive core has to be solid. Because as we know, you certainly can't win the NCHC in the first few months, but you can certainly make an uphill battle for yourselves if you aren't able to win some hockey games. So the non-conference schedule is going to be incredibly important for this forward group and this defensive core to gel together, really try to figure out what they need to do to execute a game plan. And again, that's going to all start from the back end forward. And you got a big goaltender now in Dominic Basie, again, 6'6". He's going to cover a lot of net. Mm-hmm. He's athletic, but again, they're probably looking to maybe sort of bail out the forwards a little bit. And I actually agree with that take. I think that you're going to have to almost, take the mold from the back end forward and allow your forwards to kind of play catch up. And dare I say, if they do with some of these players that are slated to come in, Noah, with some of that talent, they could be sort of a weird dark horse candidate. But we're at step 100 and we're not even at step 1 yet.
Yeah. Speaking of steps, by the way, this Kirill Kaprizov goal is for real, Nick. I did look it up. No doubt about this one. But
until the NHL, goes back later tonight and says, "Oh, by the way, we saw hit a stick in game 975 or some stuff like that."
Yeah, exactly. You know who St. Cloud might kind of remind me of moving forward? Reminds me a little bit of maybe the path that Western Michigan took a little bit, where they had some talent on the front end, but they really got grittier on the back end, had a couple of guys like Michael Joyu and those guys that would, kind of stand out here and there. But by and large, played a more physical shutdown brand of hockey in their own end, and then were able, by their defensive structure, to kind of let the horses run offensively. And I think a better example of that transition and what that would look like in a couple of years' time is the Minnesota Wild and the Minnesota Duluth Bulldogs. The ability to kind of shut down and then let those forwards essentially be able to break out and make plays there. So really exciting for this group. I think Grant Cruikshank, again, we go back to him. It's just he offers a utilitarian role. And I am honestly really glad he played for the Gophers last year. And the reason I say that is because he was in what you would call a diminished role, so to speak, I guess. But he's learned how to play as a middle six guy at this particular moment now. Now he's able to go wherever Brett Larson needs. He's a veteran guy, good leader on this team, might potentially wear a letter. I have no idea. Heading into the season, I think Brett Larson and this crew is really high on him. And he's really high on St. Cloud State, as St. Cloud is now becoming the CC Tigers 2.0 here. But, a lot of things that are really exciting for this group. And I can't wait to see where it ends up. Another team in the NCHC, as we kind of wrap up some college hockey things around, I did want to point this one up in case St. Cloud is looking for another young body that maybe is ready to make the jump on the forward side. Cole Spicer decommitting from the University of North Dakota, a Grand Forks native, playing on the U.S. under-18 team. Cole's a very nice guy. I've gotten to watch him play a couple times. He's nasty. Such a good hockey player. 16 goals, 16 assists in 50 contests for the U18 team. Probably going to be a mid to late round draft pick in this year's upcoming draft. And really, for those wondering why he decommitted, North Dakota is retooling
loaded
hard. Jackson Blake, Hurricanes draft pick, just picked up his 75th point of the season.
He's nuts.
Yeah, he's a stud. Philadelphia draft pick, Owen McLaughlin, Ben Stryden is in there, and then Dylan James, who really wasn't a big name to start the season, but could become the first rookie in the USHL to hit 60 points, having a heck of a year, probably projected to be a second or third rounder at this point, So, and then another deep list of forwards, Jaden Perron of the Chicago Steel, and then Jackson Panzer, former Minot Minotauro. He's from East Grand Forks and actually was slated to come back and be you essentially get one tender after their high school season to join the NHL for your playoff run. That was supposed to be Jackson Panzer, who had 18 points in like 13 games, if I remember correctly. And he actually played so well at East Grand that he was scooped up and is now playing in the USHL because of how good that he has played. So North Dakota is going to be a scary hockey team. If you're St. Cloud, is Cole Spicer a guy you at least put the feelers out on?
Why wouldn't you? again. You have to at least, at least got to kick the tires. And just a side note for those who don't know, Jackson Blake, yes, he's the son of Jason Blake, former Toronto Maple Leaf, resides in Edina now. I'm not sure if he's actually doing anything as far as coaching or training or anything like that, but he's got a good teacher. We'll put it to you that way. He's going to be nasty for North Dakota.
Yeah, he is. He's going to be a very good hockey player too. And then, of course, like I mentioned, Owen McLaughlin, his brother Jack as well. Of course, Owen's playing with Sioux Falls, who again we talked about, same team as Isaac Posh, who's not having the greatest of season. But Jack McLaughlin is playing at the Hills. So, a lot of guys that North Dakota just with the enamoring prospect of playing in that building for some of these recruits and their recruiting process and some of the stories that go behind it. It's no secret why North Dakota continues to be one of the best teams in the country. Yes, I said it. It made me gag, and now we're moving on. Other NCHC and Minnesota moves. We only have 3 to talk about here. Defenseman Carter Berger, he's heading from UConn to Western Michigan. That's the only NCHC notable piece. Only 8 points for him last year. He's 6'0", 201 pounds. I don't particularly get this move for Western Michigan. He's not a guy that pops out by any means, but maybe there's something defensively that they like as they're kind of trying to retool. Western's kind of a curious case for next year. But if anyone has any info on Carter Berger, we would love to hear about it because I don't know much about him, self-admittedly. So curious to see what the Broncos and Pat Ferschweiler are thinking in his second season at the helm. In Minnesota news, Bemidji State losing Lucas Sillinger, who's going to be a junior to Arizona State. This is a huge loss for them.
That's huge.
38 points in 37 games for him. Was going to be one of the primo guys for BSU. They did get Jackson Jetting back from Colorado College, who will be a junior. 10 points in 35 games, again, for the Tigers. So take that with a grain of salt. Might really increase his production in what is slated to be a weaker conference, but maybe a better team within that conference too. So he might really kind of produce as he moves closer to home. But Nick, Arizona State, a ton of pickups for them as of late. What?
And before you get too far into Arizona State, how about Jack Perbix also entering the portal also for Minnesota? I would like to see him in a Husky sweater too, just because he brings a little bit of that tenacity.
Don't think it's going to happen.
I don't think so either, but
I think he goes to NMU. I really do.
Okay.
Because his brother or his cousin is there for his freshman season. So I think that would be why, is that he's headed Blake Perbix from the St. Cloud Norseman is headed to NMU. So the one also I saw somebody talk about Vietti Mietin's little brother as well too, coming in. Can we clarify that's probably not, I don't know for certain, but I don't think he's ready to make the jump. So a couple people were talking about that. I kind of wanted to revisit that.
I thought Al Appleby had mentioned that was a done deal. Actually, but for real, actually, I thought that was.
Oh, maybe it is.
I think that was actually kind of a signed sealed thing.
Well, maybe they're bringing him in. Here's the thing, there's a lot of forwards that potentially are coming in. There could be up to 15 that could be on the roster if my number is mistaken.
They need it.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll see. I think it's going to be pretty heavy competition to see who really makes this lineup regardless for St. Cloud moving forward here. But St. Cloud is in very snowy country. Arizona State is Party City in a very warm climate, so to speak. Why are players going to Arizona State? And is there, if you're a Sun Devils fan looking forward into the future of college hockey, is there something bigger afoot here, Nick, that you might know about?
As far as how Arizona State will probably be the only hockey team in Arizona left in a couple of years. Yeah, probably. No, first of all, Arizona State has always been sort of a Midwest attraction to go south for young folks looking to, whether it's for academic reasons. They got some really nice programs, including a really good journalism program, the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism, just to name one of the many programs that they have. Obviously, a Division I powerhouse in the Pac-12, or is it the Pac-10? Sorry, I can't remember. It's one of those guys. They're on the Pacific Coast. Anyways, but great sports school. Again, when you're in Arizona, the weather's, I hear, pretty decent, not great, but decent. Totally kidding. It's fantastic. And then with Arizona State's hockey program, and get this, Noah, you talk about how each school every year has to actually, publicly disclose some of like their revenues and everything else related to sports. Arizona State's hockey team is the third most profitable sport in their portfolio. So, and that leads to something a little bit later, I think we'll discuss, and that might mean a further trend westward of college hockey, which is long overdue. And, you can probably thank Arizona State for doing so, because although they're still technically an independent school, it sounds like there's some wins that are being swept up quite rapidly that might change that in something new completely. So I'm curious to keep watching that. But Noah, if you had an opportunity to go play hockey in college in a kind of a bigger school, but go to Arizona where you can walk out, it's 70 degrees, you can do your morning run, and then go inside and play in a brand new venue here coming soon. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. And from some of the things that we hear, we're not just talking a school or two out west. We're talking potentially an entire league
conference.
Or an entire, yes.
And did you want me to divulge on that now?
Yeah,
or
I would say go for it, because I think this will leave fans salivating for the future of college hockey. We talked about the growth, the question marks with the Alaska schools, the question marks with schools like Alabama, Huntsville. Hockey has really not trended west so far, but that might be changing.
So for those of you who have followed me closely, you've noticed that, since the NCHC Frozen Face-Up, I've been hopping on a podcast called Southwest College Hockey Live. It's run by Scott Strandy. Scott Strandy is a former journalist. He spent 20 plus years in Arizona, now his first year in Denver, but essentially has all the contacts, including the Tempe City Council, including the Glendale City Council. Yes, there's plenty of Coyotes tidbits that I know. But effectively, there's, I forget the name of the gentleman, but there's one predominant person that's been sort of like, what you call it, the John Forzen of college hockey in Southwest the United States. And effectively what we're seeing is now with Lindenwood, which is in Missouri, right, going D1. Oregon's had a really good club team for a while. Yes, there is some talk that within the next 2 years, they're slated to make the jump to Division I. And then here's what we're hearing. We're hearing UNLV, which should not surprise folks with Vegas and everything else. And supposedly the sort of question mark with them was, would there be sort of an overexposure of hockey in that area? I think with how successful the Vegas Golden Knights have been in terms of their community outreach, I think those have been squashed. Now with still, Henderson and whatnot, I think there's a good balance there. And then a couple of other names to note. How about San Diego State University apparently making the jump?
Yeah.
And apparently what they're waiting on is the financial review from Arizona State to look over the numbers for the last 3 years. We know UCLA, as well as I think another school, has already done economic studies on a Division I hockey program. So let's just assume all this happens, right, Noah? So you have what a West Coast Hockey Conference, so the WCHC, that's what I'll call it. What the hell is you have Alaska Fairbanks, you have Alaska Anchorage, you have Air Force, you have Arizona State, you have Lindenwood, UNLV, Oregon, and San Diego State. There's your 8 squads.
And maybe UCLA.
Yeah. The time frame for this, and mind you, a lot of things have to go right for this. This is by no means anywhere in concrete. Would be probably 6 to 10 years for that to take place. And why that's so important, this solves, I think, almost for eternity, the problem with the Alaska schools in terms of their traveling and being in a conference. It solves the Air Force problem. It solves Arizona State's independent problem. It really only puts an island on one college hockey team, and that is Alabama Huntsville. They still really haven't found a sustainable future as of yet.
And hockey is continuing to grow in the South. You had a couple of the schools in Florida that potentially could have some teams, and you could see that landscape change as well too. And I think that the ability to see that progress out west might influence that move. I feel like the Southeast is probably the last.
It would be
the last move that college hockey is able to make. That would be college hockey thriving at its best. But what a great treat potentially for the Alaska schools as well too. I think there's so many great things. Arizona State has done a hell of a job entering and giving themselves a chance to really kind of build for the future, so to speak. Also, we also didn't mention, by the way, this has nothing to do with the West per se, but Lindenwood did announce their Division I prospect for their school as well too. So they'll enter play. I can't remember if it's next year or the year after.
No, this year.
It is next year.
This year, yep.
Yeah. So that's exciting as well too. Of course, they are at the Division I women's level in terms of those players already playing St. Cloud State in their women's program. So good to see them add the men's program as well. So college hockey is maybe on the rebound here, and you gotta wonder, Nick. You gotta wonder if the old WCHA doesn't fold. Does this conversation actually happen? I know there's been some discussion that the old WCHA was kind of on its way down anyway, and maybe that the split actually had fans able to point their finger at something different than just the natural dissipation of the conference itself. Mm-hmm. I wonder, though, if we still have the old WCHA and we aren't used to maybe some of the shuffle and whatever you want to call it that we've had in the recent decade or so. Maybe this becomes a more difficult topic than it is currently, but I'm excited. I really am.
I think, I don't know if you can point it directly. I do think it has some weight to the conversation.
100% hot take. You heard it here. No.
Right. Well, and here's why I say that. Here's what for your point of view, right? The NCHC, if the WCHA stays together, because what was it? Colorado College was still there. Was Denver was part of it?
The old WCHA?
Yeah, I don't think it was.
Boy, that's a great question.
I know CC was.
Let me look.
Because the last time I covered the Final Five in St. Paul, CC upset Minnesota in 2013 at the Xcel Energy Center.
I got you. 12 teams here: St. Cloud, Minnesota, North Dakota, Wisconsin, Denver, Minnesota State.
Denver was there. Okay.
Bemidji. I think.
Bemidji was
Nebraska, Omaha, Colorado College, Minnesota Duluth, Michigan Tech, Bemidji State, and Alaska Anchorage.
Okay. So yes and no. I think so. Let me say it this way, because they kind of cut off the Alaska schools. It's sort of an indirect thing, right? Because again, was it Fairbanks that had to be kind of saved?
No, Anchorage.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it is forcing, some of that conversation to go, okay, well, if we're going to be sustainable long-term, as independents, it ain't going to work. Right. So, it essentially these plans, right. Both for Huntsville and then for Anchorage, the money they did raise, which is phenomenal to save the programs. A part of that stipulation was there has to be a conference to join. It's got to be a long-term deal. Right. Yeah. With the way it's in the works for the Alaska schools, if what we're hearing actually comes to fruition. Now, I don't think we pay enough attention to the club hockey scene. And again, because even if you go just south of the border, again, Iowa State, they both got club teams, and there's a lot of turnout for those squads. So I think the bigger question is, take one of the schools that we talked about, Oregon, because they've kind of dominated the Division I club team era for a while. What's prevented the school? What's the economic reasons or anything else that's prevented them from making the jump already, right? Granted, facilities and everything else, scholarships. I'm sure there's a bigger circle of fun that, we just obviously can't cover in one show. But at the end of the day, if all this does come to plan, there's a bigger piece to this, Noah. That is, you hate to say it, it goes kind of back to the Arizona Coyotes. It really does.
Yes, it does.
It does. And I think there is a point to be made that if Arizona can't get their crap together and cannot stay in Arizona, that would have a fundamental large impact on college hockey expansion out west. I really do feel that way. Just in the sense that
and it's a mess. It's a mess.
It's a mess. And, could you make the argument that the hockey is kind of done its job? And, if there's plans are already in place and it's more of just formality at this point, maybe, but I don't think we're that close just yet. Again, with UNLV, with San Diego State, I'm hearing they would be part of the last schools that would make the jump. With UCLA, we're talking 5 to 7 years down the road. Oregon, from what I hear, is the closest at maybe 2 to 3 years. So again, there's still a lot of things that have to go right. And you kind of wonder, to me, I think the catalyst school, if we take the Coyotes out of the conversation, I think Oregon has to be the catalyst. Because if you go all the way to the West Coast, then it's like, okay, you already have the two jumps across the pond with the Alaska schools. Then if you can get UNLV involved, and then you have Air Force, You have conversations now.
You need one in the Northwest. You need one in Cali. I think,
you do.
And I think Vegas is a good pickup. I had a couple buddies who went to UNLV actually that I played with in college, and their setup there relative to the Golden Knights and just kind of where they're at as a school is a fantastic location for a potential Division I team. That's a school that I can easily see that happening. So,
and how about this as a conversation piece? The 2025 or 26 Frozen Four is in Las Vegas because it's 20. So next year, 23 Tampa, 24 St. Paul, 25 St. Louis, so 26, right? It's got to be 26. Has to be 26 for the Frozen Four. Imagine that's about 4 or 5 years away. Imagine at that Frozen Four, UNLV announces D1. Well, let's just say Oregon's already happened, and maybe, the last two to join would be UCLA/San Diego. You have 6 teams. So let's just say Air Force starts talking to Arizona State, then the Alaska schools in Oregon, and now UNLV, and they go, crap, we got 2 more. Dad, guys, get on board. We got a conference here. If you have someone pushing the envelope and have like a kind of a central voice for that, and I do believe that this contact that Scott has talked about that's kind of been the forefront of Arizona's program to rise, if he's part of that conversation and maybe becomes that commissioner, we're finally across the entire, U.S. in terms of, except the Southeast, but that'll be much later. But
where's Josh Fenton?
Huge. Josh Fenton apparently likes basketball.
Well, that sounds a bit ballsy, if you know what I mean. I'm actually, funny enough, Nick, I'm actually texting with Caleb Peabody right now, and he goes, I told you about Grant Cruikshank. I'm like, okay. So apparently we're circling back to that now too. But, players like that, of course, coming from Colorado College, you hope that it expands further west as we continue on in the college hockey world. We'll kind of save some more of our Arizona tidbits as those things kind of unfold. But the situation on the NHL side, as of now,
not good,
and not as hopeful for potential opportunity in Tempe as we would once hope. We're going to head more central-ish, more south-ish. NHL news. St. Louis and Minnesota just finishing that game. For those who are curious, Nick, Minnesota losing in overtime in this one, but a well-earned point in a good comeback here. What does it all mean for the playoff push, as these two teams are probably destined to meet in the NHL playoffs? And welcome into the Extra Ice Session, episode number 108 here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. Nick Maxon alongside Noah Grant here. I only got about 15 to 20 minutes here left in the show. And, one of the things, Nick, that it's kind of been refreshing to at least do the show this week is here in Minot, I think we had the record for the most snow in the Midwest in the recent snowstorm. We got 37.2 inches of snow here in Minot, North Dakota. And Nick, recording here on Saturday night, we have another winter warning. We're supposed to get 8 to 10 inches in the next couple of days. So we just cannot catch a break. It is absolutely insane. Wow. But at least we'll have some hockey to be watching here as Minnesota and St. Louis head down the stretch here. St. Louis getting that extra point in the game today here as we record on Saturday at 100 points in the standings. Minnesota at 99. Minnesota one more game in hand and one less regulation win, one more regulation loss, and 3 less overtime finishes. So, a very, very tight running here as we've gone through. So these two teams kicked the absolute crap out of each other today in this hockey game in a very wild finish, Nick. And I was thinking about this actually before the St. Louis game, and it kind of became more apparent with the special team success here. Minnesota and St. Louis have taken very different paths to get here. Minnesota, statistically, in a lot of categories besides goals for, is not a juggernaut in a lot of areas. In fact, they're really porous statistically in a lot of areas, in terms of special teams, face-off, things like that. But they found success in their ability in one-goal hockey games, and their ability with the goaltender pull as well, too, has lended some success, giving themselves a chance, Nick. So meanwhile, St. Louis, about as consistent of a well-oiled machine as you could get at this time of the season, a hard, heavy team, a good mix of speed and skill. This is a matchup that has a chance to go to the distance here, and is kind of a scary prospect for, I think, both of these clubs looking at the other team. Nick, what do you expect? Do these two teams, first of all, do they get each other in the first round?
They do. I
Yeah.
don't see how Nashville and Dallas catch them. For those wondering, point spread wise, St. Louis actually with this overtime win also clinches officially a spot in the Stanley Cup playoffs at 100 points even, although they have played 75 games to the Wild at 99 points, but one less game play. So at the end of it, to me, this is the two, because if you go down the list, it's Nashville at 75 games played, 91 points, and Dallas 89 points with 74 games played. At this point of the season, I just don't expect really that to sway anyways. And how about this for Vegas fans, right? 75 games played currently up in Edmonton. They're down 3-0 to the Oilers. They're 2 points behind a wild card. But how about this? They're only a single point below the Los Angeles Kings for the third spot in the Pacific. And actually the Kings have one more game played. So Vegas's game today could be pretty huge. Los Angeles will be in action later tonight as well. I believe they are hosting. Yes, they're hosting the Columbus Blue Jackets. So there is still a way for Vegas to get in via essentially the Pacific Division, Noah. But for the Minnesota Wild, I do think it's Blues in Minnesota. And I know a lot of onus gets put on having home ice. I do think that would be something that any team would want, especially for St. Louis. This is,
I think it's huge for both.
Huge. It's huge, especially for matchups and for Minnesota Wild playoff fandom that just has never really loved everything about this team. And the one time they did have some success, 2003, I don't think anybody expected them to have the success that they did.
Yeah.
But I do feel like home ice could be huge. So if Minnesota can get back on the winning ways and get a break from St. Louis, maybe they drop a game here. I think Minnesota's off for the next couple of days. Actually, no, they're back tomorrow hosting San Jose. So they go back home. It's a back-to-back. So San Jose, oh boy, I don't think they're eliminated officially from the playoffs, but if they are, they're well out. They're not going to make the playoffs this year. Trying to play spoiler alert, so gonna have a well-rested Minnesota squad coming off of a unfortunate loss against St. Louis, and these two teams right now are the matchup.
You know what's interesting is St. Louis and Minnesota are tied for the fourth most wins on home ice in the National Hockey League. They're
21,
26. They are.
Oh wow.
They are one behind Toronto and Carolina. Colorado's at 30 and Florida's at 32. So you kind of talk about how important home ice is. How about this on the road too? St. Louis 19 wins on the road. Minnesota has 20 wins on the road.
I was thinking of their road record.
So these two teams have really battled it out. Minnesota going to the extra session and the shootout a lot more times than the Blues have. The Blues a very good overtime team, as they demonstrated today as well. So a lot of things that play into the factor here. Out of all the teams in the Central, for whatever reason, Minnesota really struggles with Nashville. So I don't know that you really want the Preds for whatever reason.
No,
I'd take Dallas, but they're not going to get there. And I'd honestly, in a weird way, I think I'd take Colorado over St. Louis. Just the way these two teams have really kicked the crap out of each other. This is going to be a heavy first round series. And I don't know who it favors. I feel like whoever has home ice, that might be the difference maker, unless the special teams advantage and face-off advantage is so huge for St. Louis that Minnesota can't find enough puck luck or enough whatever the heck they sprinkled into their Gatorades in period number 3 today to claw their way back into a hockey game.
And not to mention, too, still some injured players out for Minnesota. I don't believe Matt Dumba is back. They're still taking Jordan Greenway, John Merrill also. And this is the part, right? We can take a look at one hockey game, but you got to remember, too, that the playoffs are a best of 7, right? So over a long series. Minnesota
is 0-8-3 in their last 11 against St. Louis.
Yeah. So that's concerning. And again, with what we talked about before, this is without basically either of these teams essentially losing out and either Dallas or Nashville winning out, which is not going to happen. This is going to be the 2-3 matchup in the Central first round. I think over a 7-game series, I do think it still favors the Blues just because of the way that they have that grit plus that skill. I mean, David Perron, man, what a catalyst he has been for St. Louis. Was actually one of the big catalysts when Vegas had their inaugural season too. I think David Perron was one of the most underrated pickups that they had in that expansion draft / the trade deadline acquisition. So Perron continue to light it up because Tarasenko has been coming on hot lately. They got young guys like, was it Mike Thomas?
Robert Thomas.
Robert Thomas. Thank you. Can you tell
Thomas the Train?
Thomas the Train. Yes. So, yeah, Robert Thomas. And then is it not Buchnevich? It's
yeah, Buchnevich is good.
Yeah, no. I'm thinking, because Buchnevich was the former Ranger that was traded. I'm thinking of Barbashev.
Yeah.
Barbashev, a little bit of that sandpaper guy. They've got, and then obviously Falk in the back end, just one of the many pieces they have was Colton Parayko. I really like his game too.
Normally we pull up the Minnesota Wild stats, by the way, in case you forgot. Kirill Kaprizov has 93 points in the season. Not too shabby. Matt Zuccarello approaching 75 here. What an incredible turnaround it has been for him. Kevin Fiala is approaching 70 points as well if he hadn't hit it already today. So can we get that man re-signed? But speaking of re-signings, how about the fact the Blues and their journey, right? You have a goaltender who has essentially stolen the net from Jordan Binnington and Ville Husso, and the way that he has played a .237 GAA and a .925 save percentage. He has been electric heading down the stretch here. Vladimir Tarasenko was essentially pretty much signed, sealed, and delivered to have his contract shedded somewhere else for not a lot of return for the St. Louis group. He leads the team with 72 points, right in front of Robert Thomas with 71 before today's contest. And then Buchnevich, Jordan Kyrou in his All-Star season has been impressive. David Perron continues to have a good year. So,
and wasn't it Tarasenko too, not to butt in, but didn't he request a trade too last summer? Yes, he did.
Yeah, he did. And it's been one heck of a turnaround here. But, you got to really credit General Manager Armstrong and the ability that he has in St. Louis to stay patient, trust along with Craig Berube in this plan for the St. Louis Blues. There's a reason they won a cup in 2019. There's a reason that they're now perennial contender for a Stanley Cup season in and season out. This is a scary matchup for the Minnesota Wild. However, I think this Wild team is more well equipped than in years past to potentially handle this challenge. Ironically enough, if memory serves me correct, the best team in Minnesota Wild history in terms of offensive production was actually 2016-17. And that is the last time the Wild actually matched up against the St. Louis Blues. And they absolutely handled the Wild in 5 games in that series, escaping game 1 by the skin of their teeth and then running away with that series pretty much from then on out. This Minnesota Wild team is different. They have the same offensive production, but they seem like they can handle fire wagon hockey as opposed to teams that we've known in years past here. Nick, you said before that this 7-game series maybe favors St. Louis. If you're in the Wild locker room, you get this matchup in round 1. What do you got to do to make sure that regardless of how many games as it is, you're the first team to 4 wins?
I think it's going to come down to commitment to the physical part of the game, honestly. And I really do think it's going to be about between the blue lines. I think the neutral zone is going to be huge in this, not only for the Wild in terms of just keeping it simple, ducking down, but then also maintaining puck possession, but more so for St. Louis. They're not very much a different team. Do they have, some star players? Yeah, you mentioned Jordan Kyrou, again, Tarasenko, Robert Thomas, again, just name a few, but again, this team plays a bigger game than their stature, and they like to pound you. They almost remind me of a Western Michigan a little bit in terms of how they play the game. And this is where, like today, you really miss guys like John Merrill and Matt Dumba on the back end to really kind of take away some of that advantage and be able to kind of go toe-to-toe with these guys, especially behind the goal line. So it's going to be about, taking and delivering hits and really forcing St. Louis to play defense. I think if you can kind of hem them in their zone and wear them down below their own goal line and then just kind of force them to defend, to dump out and change, to really kind of take away the Tarasenkos of the world and some of their production they also get from the blue line, such as Colton Parayko and the others such Justin Falk. That's the key. And if you can weather the storm, especially the first couple of games, I think you're going to force St. Louis to kind of get away from that heavy grind style and force them to play a little bit more open hockey. And that's what favors Minnesota in that matchup. So the first 2 games would be critical, but that's how you would do it.
I kind of look to see where regular season success translate into playoff performance. I imagine we'll see a much I thought he wasn't even bad last year, but a much more calm and composed Kirill Kaprizov as he enters this playoff round. Kevin Fiala poses to be a factor here. One player that I have my eye on here, Nick, that's Matt Boldy. And the reason I bring him up, right? He does have, let's see, 4, 5, 6. He has 7 points in his last 6 games. So he has had some production as of late. Before that, he had a stretch where he had 6 games without a point and 1 point in a stretch of 8 games essentially in there as well. He's had a good season, no doubt, especially for the regular season here. At times, with that line, it feels like Freddie Gaudreau, who's having a whale of a year, by the way,
yes,
and Kevin Fiala have kind of been the 1-2 duo, and Matt Boldy has kind of been an accessory piece on that line.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me a little nervous as we've gone through. How is he going to perform in the playoffs? Because at times I feel like even in the regular season, he becomes a little bit invisible, maybe becomes a little bit opportunistic, which is a good thing in the playoffs. Sometimes you need that guy to pop when you don't expect it. But the physicality piece has not been a huge part of his game. Obviously, big wingspan, good size, able to protect the puck well, but he's not a guy where he's a buzzsaw, annoying gnat to play against. I think Kevin Fiala has kind of turned into a player like that. Freddie Gaudreau is definitely the definition of that, where he's hard in on pucks. Yeah, exactly. And Eriksson's having a great season as well, too. Matt Boldy is, dare I say, in some senses, the key to the cog for moving into playoff time for this line to continue to
100%.
He has to find a way to be able to handle the playoff pressure, to be able to handle limited time and space, to be able to handle the physicality that St. Louis is going to bring in this matchup here, should they get the Blues in the first round. I think he's going to be a pivotal piece. My last point here, and I'm trying to buy myself some time, I wanted to see what his stat line was today, because that Fiala, Gaudreau, Boldy line they were okay tonight, but they weren't exactly electric. So Matt Boldy today.
While you do that,
he had a point today. He was -1, so with 2 giveaways in 12 minutes of ice time. So I'd like you to expand a little bit for the listeners on why we're kind of making this point here, because Matt Boldy, for such a young guy, you wouldn't think he'd have such a big piece in the playoff success, but he really could.
Well, in fact, he holds the key to both Fiala and Gaudreau, right?
Yep.
You know, it's when you have an offensive line. Matt Boldy, he's looked good. Again, you mentioned he's really good protecting pucks, making smart decisions with it, not trying to do too much, right? The playoffs is going to be a different animal. Kaprizov learned that last year. I think he's definitely ready for it this year. And I think it also helps you play a team like Vegas, where, I mean, we forget too that Vegas was kind of pushing Minnesota Wild around last year. And, you know, they were equal to the task for the most part, but just ran out of gas in game 7. I think you're going to see a very similar matchup against St. Louis and Minnesota. And for Matt Boldy, if you're going to really create the depth, aka depth. Yes, I'm talking to some certain national panels. Right. But at the end of it, he is the key for that depth piece, right? If he can even just make a first pass out of the zone, if he's the winger receiving that breakout pass, he can find it and not get scared or, you know, not get pummeled over, get afraid to take a hit, right? If he can spring Fiala and Gaudreau can come in and help, there's a lot that's there that can either make this line formidable and at least a threat to score, even though maybe they don't, or a line that's kind of a defensive liability and they're always caught deep and they can't get out of the zone and they're just there to, you know, be sort of the ringer for the St. Louis Blues. So he's a big part of it. Again, with all rookies, we'll have to wait and see how he handles the pressure. But I think at this point, you know, I'm confident. But again, he's going to have to learn to play a little bit more of that sandpaper type game if he's going to have success here in the postseason.
The Wild also really need another body who I'm excited that we finally get to say this. They're going to need Jordan Greenway back.
Yes, they are.
Because what he's brought to the table this season has been very underrated. Only has 23 points on the year, but when he is in the lineup, he has been the big rig and a half. The trucking company has been moving at full force this season for number 18 in the Green and Wheats. I think he's going to be another pivotal piece come playoff time here, Nick. We only have about 2 minutes left here in the show because of some obligations and some gremlins that we had in the show today, so we apologize for that. Nick, before I send it to the outro, is there anything you wanted to add about the NHL playoffs, the Minnesota Wild, anything that you want to talk about? I know the Eastern Conference is so riveting, I get it, but is there anything else besides what's going on in the East that you want to talk about?
Well, how about this? Could you imagine this? So there's been a lot of comparisons right now between the NBA playoffs in terms of their structure, and could the NHL do the same thing? I kind of want them to do this. Do you know what they've
Yeah,
what they've done?
where 7 plays 10, 8 plays 9, and then the winners of those two play each other for the final spots, essentially. Yeah.
Essentially. Yeah. So I think at some point, why not, right? There's extra ticket revenue. It creates a little bit more of that wild.
My answer is no.
Well,
And the
because
reason
you're a purist, I get it.
not that. The reason being is that hockey, statistically among the 4 major sports in North America, has the highest percentage of an outcome of a single game related to luck, related to specific like bounces, like plays that happen, puck luck, essentially is what you would call it, versus basketball is actually a game with the least number of luck involved because skill trumps all. We've seen the super teams that take championship after championship. That's where I think maybe that concept is a little more suited to the NBA. I love the concept in general. I don't disagree with it. I think the problem is you'd have to have a 3-game series, so to speak, maybe more akin to baseball, where you could really hash that out. Because I think one game, if you have, for example, if we pull it up here, 7 versus 10, the point disparity is huge. But if you play poorly for one game, I get the premise of it, but I think it kind of detracts from what a great season some of these teams have had.
Could college hockey do it? This is where I was leading to. Could college hockey do this to incorporate more teams into the postseason?
I would be more interested to do it in college hockey simply because of the fact that there maybe is a little bit more parity in the top 20, so to speak, for college hockey. And beyond that, they're used to the single elimination, single game format.
Yep.
I honestly think as well, I know we've seen the NCAA playoffs. The most exciting part of the NCAA playoffs, in my opinion, is the first round, the best of 3 series. And I think after that, it loses some luster besides, a potential riveting game a la 2019 at the Xcel Energy Center. So I'm kind of in between. I'm torn on it, if that makes sense. In fact, I wanted to see conference standings. I wanted to pull it up. Obviously, we're looking at the West right now, not the East. So right now, Dallas would actually get Vancouver, who is at 84 points. And the winner of that game is in the 7th spot. And then Los Angeles would get Vegas, which would be a heck of a hockey game, obviously. Yep. And then who is it? The loser of Dallas and Vancouver gets the winner of LA and Vegas, correct?
Yep.
So, yeah, and actually Nashville would be well safe in the Western Conference in 6th place right now. They would actually get Calgary in the first round. So, it's interesting, but I think that, like Dallas has 89 points and Vancouver has 84. I don't know. Are you comfortable saying that, Dallas should be playing Vancouver? I don't think Vancouver's had a very great season this year. They're lucky to be where they are in a lot of senses.
I think, well, with the coaching change and obviously some front office changes, they've turned their season around, and it's kind of a.
Or what would it look like in the East, right? Number 10 Columbus is playing number 7 Pittsburgh in the point disparity, 97-76. Like that's.
Well, the East is all locked up besides the 2 wild cards too. So whatever. That's an anomaly too. But I at the end of it, I just want to see more hockey. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Should they? Last question: should they go back to the 1-8 format? I know a lot of people have been clamoring for that because, as we know with the divisional format, if you have 5 teams that are the best out of the top 8 in their specific division relative to the conference, they're going to be in the playoffs in the 1-8 format anyway.
So if that is the case, right? So that means that, you have Colorado, St. Louis, Calgary, Minnesota, Edmonton, Nashville, Dallas, Los Angeles as your top 8, which means you have Colorado and Los Angeles, St. Louis, Dallas, Calgary, Nashville. And how about this? The Minnesota Wild hosting the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah.
If that goes back to the old format, and it doesn't change anything as far as you still have
it does though
5 teams from the same division.
I think it does in the sense that the first round is generally one of the most exciting rounds because so many teams are playing in the playoffs.
Well,
right?
What I mean is
but then you
the
hit
teams getting in.
Right, but then you hit the second round, and that's where you start to see maybe the primo interdivisional matchups.
Versus them happening right away.
Correct.
Yes. So, and I think I don't disagree with that. So, for example, if it was East, it'd be Florida, Washington, 1-8, Carolina, Pittsburgh, Rangers, Boston, which would be hell. How about this Toronto, Tampa? That'd be a hell of a match. So, I think there is a conversation there. I don't know why. Besides the wild card, I really forget the reason why the NHL went to this format. The top 3.
Travel.
Was it travel?
I believe it's travel
because the freaking playoffs.
Because it limits one of those basically only one team potentially would have to travel. That would be the top team. And they might end up getting a wild card team that would potentially still be in their division anyway. So,
fair.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, travel's part of it. You go to play for the playoffs. Let's have the better matchups it just whatever. So it'd be kind of fun to see it go back. Do I think it's happening? No.
We clearly need to go back to the pool of 24, Nick, obviously.
I do. Clearly. So
yeah, that will do it for episode number 108. Speaking of playoffs, by the time that we come back for episode 109, we'll be a day away from some NHL first round action in the playoffs. We'll know where the Minnesota Wild sit. We'll know where everything is related to them, and we are excited to bring you all of it. We're taking a week off next week, and we hope to see you back in a couple weeks. For Nick Maxon, I'm Noah Grant, and we'll see you back for episode number 109.
Here, one-timer, come in, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.